All right, let's dive into something pretty interesting today, something that a lot of people have heard of, but maybe don't really understand. We're talking about Tantra. You've
Yes.
probably heard the word, maybe seen, some attention-grabbing headlines about it. But let's be real. What comes to mind is probably more Hollywood than actual history. So we're going beyond all that hype, and we're diving deep with an awesome source, Principles of Tantra. This book was originally written in Bengali by Pandit Shiva Chandra Vijayankava Bhattacharya.
Quite a name.
Yeah, and it was published about 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And it's really a deep dive into the real deal, the historical and philosophical core of Tantra.
And it's so fascinating how this book, like right off the bat, it tackles all these misconceptions that are out there. Tantra, a lot of times it gets reduced down to like exotic rituals, and people often, especially in the West, really fixate on, the ones involving sexuality.
Right.
And, the book's preface, it acknowledges that, that's kind of how the West tends to view it. But this deep dive, it's really about understanding, not just sensationalism.
Exactly. It's like the book is like, hold on, let me clear some things up here. It even jumps into like why Tantra scriptures are even needed in the first place and how they actually fit in with the broader picture of Hindu thought, especially alongside the Vedas.
Hmm.
And that's really tackled head on in chapters like necessity for the Tantra scripture and what is the necessity for the Tantras when there is the Veda.
Yeah, and what's really cool is the book doesn't try to pit Tantra and the Vedas against each other. Like, it's not about one being superior to the other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It actually argues that Tantra came about to meet the needs of spiritual seekers at different times.
So like different paths up the same mountain.
Exactly, different paths up the same mountain. The book makes this case that Tantra is actually a more accessible and practical path, especially in the age we're living in now, which in Hindi thought is called the Kali Yuga. It's basically a time of like increased challenges and spiritual decline.
So Tantra is kind of like a spiritual toolkit,
Yeah.
specifically for navigating these kind of rough waters. That's pretty relevant today, don't you think? But what about these tools? We're not just talking, basic meditation here, are we?
Not exactly, no. The book, it gets into some pretty intense rituals. And yeah, some of them do involve sexuality, but they're all deeply symbolic and really meant to transform energy, not just indulge in pleasure.
Speaking of energy, there's a whole chapter on the ephemeral and modern monism,
Hmm.
where the book just dives into this philosophical debate about form and formlessness in spiritual experiences. Like, how do we, connect to something beyond our senses, something infinite when we're still living in this very physical world?
That's the core of the argument, isn't it? The book, it sets up this conversation between a non-dualist, so someone who believes everything is ultimately one, this formless essence, and a tantric sadhaka, a practitioner. And the sadhaka, they acknowledge this ultimate unity, but they argue that in our everyday experience, forms and rituals can actually help us connect to that formless truth.
So it's not about denying the world around us, but using it as a stepping stone to something bigger. I like that.
Exactly. And that's really where the direct and superior power of Tantra comes in. The book argues that that Tantra offers a way to embrace both, the formless and the form, seeing the divine in literally everything around us.
Okay, so we're starting to see how Tantra is more than just a bunch of rituals, right? It's a whole worldview, a way of understanding reality and our place in it.
And that worldview, it really emphasizes experience. It's not just about, reading scriptures or debating philosophy. It's about actually putting these ideas into practice. That's where the concept of sadhana comes in, which basically means spiritual practice or discipline. And we see this concept explored in chapters like Worship in General and Ceremonial Worship Continued. And those chapters, they give us a little peek into how these practices were actually conducted.
So are we talking like yoga, meditation, that kind of thing?
It's broader than that. Think of sadhana as like a toolbox filled with all these different techniques like mantra, yantra, specific rituals, and they're all designed to help you tap into your inner potential and experience a deeper connection to the divine. And here's where it gets really interesting. The book even dedicates a whole chapter to choosing your guru, discussion upon, and selection of the guru.
That makes sense. It's powerful
Yeah.
stuff. And you probably don't want to mess around with it without some expert guidance.
Exactly. Tantra can be easily misunderstood or even misused. So having a qualified guru is crucial. The book, it really hammers that point home.
So we're starting to see a picture emerge here. Tantra isn't just some like fringe movement. It's a deeply rooted tradition with its own philosophy, practices, and even, guidelines for finding a teacher. This is way more nuanced than I ever realized.
And we've only just scratched the surface. The book goes on to explore some of the more controversial elements of Tantra, like those infamous 5 M's.
Okay, I knew we'd get there eventually. But before we go down that rabbit hole, maybe let's take a step back and look at the historical context a bit more. How did Tantra actually develop within Hinduism?
That's a great question, and one the book tackles head on. It traces the evolution of Tantra, how it interacted with other schools of thought, and even addresses some of the attempts to discredit it.
Oh, like how?
Yeah. Well, some folks try to claim that Tantra just kind of stole its ideas from Buddhism,
Yeah.
essentially trying to like downplay its importance within Hinduism.
Interesting, but the book doesn't just let that slide, right?
Oh, not at all. It directly refutes those claims and points out some key differences between the two traditions. For example, animal sacrifice. It's strictly forbidden in Buddhism, but you actually find it in some tantric rituals.
Whoa, that's a pretty stark contrast. But I'm guessing the book offers an explanation for that, right?
Oh, you bet. The book explains that in the context of Tantra, animal sacrifice is meant to be like deeply symbolic. It's not about cruelty, but about transcending your ego and offering your lower nature to the divine.
Okay, that makes a little more sense. But even then, it still seems like pretty intense stuff. It reminds me of that whole chapter on choosing a guru. It feels like the book is really stressing that Tantra isn't something to just, you know, dabble in on your own.
Absolutely. It requires proper guidance and understanding, especially when you're dealing with, rituals that could be easily misinterpreted. Speaking of powerful concepts, let's talk about Shakti. You find this term everywhere in Tantra, and the book dives deep into its meaning.
Okay, yeah, Shakti. I feel like I've heard that word thrown around a lot, but I'm not sure I fully get it. What's the deal with Shakti?
Think of Shakti as the ultimate feminine power, the dynamic energy that fuels the entire universe. It's the creative force, the lifeblood of everything. And in Tantra, it's seen as being like inseparable from Shiva, the masculine principle.
So like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly, two sides of the same coin. And the goal in Tantra is to achieve union between those two forces within yourself. It's like a balancing act that leads to liberation.
That's fascinating. It makes me think of that debate about form and formlessness we were talking about earlier. Is this where Tantra's view of the material world comes in?
You're right on track. This is one of the big differences between Tantra and some other schools of Hindu thought that advocate for, renouncing the world. Tantra sees the material world as a manifestation of the divine, of Shakti in action.
So it's not about escaping reality, but embracing it, seeing the divine in everything around us.
Exactly. It's about experiencing life fully with all its, ups and downs and finding that spark of the divine even in the mundane.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this all connects. You have Shakti, this universal energy,
Yeah.
and then you have the material world as its playground.
Yeah.
And then Tantra offers practices to help you tune into that energy and experience the divine in everything.
Precisely. And those practices, that's where sadhana comes in. Think of it as like actively cultivating that connection through rituals, meditation, or even just by, changing your perspective on everyday experiences. The book even goes into ceremonial worship of the five, which gives you a sense of like the structure and the steps involved.
So it's not just about sitting on a mountaintop meditating. It's about integrating these principles into your daily life.
Exactly. It's about making the mundane sacred, finding those moments of connection in the everyday hustle and bustle.
That's actually really appealing. It's like Tantra offers a way to find meaning and purpose in everything you do.
And that's where the transformative power lies. It's not just about intellectual understanding, but about changing your experience of the world from the inside out.
Okay, I'm sold. But let's be honest, there's one part of Tantra that most people are curious about, or maybe even a little scared to talk about. Those 5 Mims. It's the elephant in the room, right?
You're not wrong. It's definitely the most talked about and often the most misunderstood aspect of Tantra. But the book doesn't shy away from it. In fact, it dedicates a whole section to explaining the symbolism and significance of each of those Mims.
All right, let's unpack it. We've got Madhya, wine, Masa, meat, Matsya, fish, Mudra, grain, and Mathuna, sexual union. I'm already getting a little nervous.
I understand the apprehension, but remember, context is everything here. The book repeatedly emphasizes that these are not about indulgence or hedonism. They're tools for spiritual transformation, and each one carries a specific symbolic meaning.
So it's not just a free pass a party.
Definitely not. For example, Madhya, the wine, it's about transcending inhibitions, experiencing a kind of divine intoxication that allows you to access a different state of consciousness.
Okay, so it's more about expanding your awareness, not just getting drunk. But what about masa, the meat? That one seems particularly hard to wrap your head around.
It's about overcoming aversion
Yeah.
and recognizing the interconnectedness of all beings. It's a powerful reminder that life and death are part of a cycle. And even in death, there's a kind of sacred energy.
I see. It's about pushing past your comfort zone and seeing things from a different perspectives. So what about fish or matsya? Where does that fit in?
Matsya symbolizes overcoming attachment to sensory pleasures. It's about cultivating detachment, like a fish swimming effortlessly through water, unfazed by the currents.
Okay, that makes sense. Detachment is definitely a theme I'm seeing emerge here. But what about mudra? That one seems a little out of place next to wine and meat.
Mudra is grain, often rice,
Hmm.
and it represents the offering of yourself to the divine. It's about surrendering your ego, your desires, your limitations, and completely merging with something bigger than yourself.
That's beautiful. It's like a complete act of surrender and devotion. All right, and now for the big one, the one everyone's been waiting for, Maithuna.
This one is definitely the most controversial and the most often misinterpreted. But the book is very clear that in the tantric context, Maithuna is not about sensual pleasure for its own sake. It's about the union of opposites, the merging of Shiva and Shakti within yourself.
So it's a symbolic act representing a much deeper spiritual concept.
Exactly. It's about experiencing the divine through the merging of masculine and feminine energies, ultimately achieving a state of blissful non-duality.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. All of these five M's, they're not meant to be taken literally. They're symbolic representations of internal processes,
Hmm?
of pushing past limitations and achieving higher states of awareness.
That's a great insight. And the book really emphasizes that these practices are incredibly advanced and should only be undertaken by those who have reached a certain level of spiritual maturity
Right.
and have the guidance of a realized guru.
That makes sense. It seems like the book is really trying to steer people away from approaching Tantra with a sense of curiosity or experimentation, especially when it comes to the five M's.
Absolutely. It's about approaching these practices with reverence and a genuine desire for transformation, not for, cheap thrills or personal gain.
So while these five M's might seem, shocking or taboo at first glance, they're actually part of a very specific and symbolic language within Tantra. It's like learning a new way of thinking and seeing the world.
Exactly. And like any language, it takes time and effort to understand its nuances and complexities.
Okay, so we've explored the philosophy, the history, and even the more controversial aspects
Hmm.
of Tantra. But I'm curious, how does this ancient wisdom actually apply to our lives today? Most of us aren't exactly living in ashrams or spending our days in deep meditation.
That's a great question. And one the book actually addresses directly. It dedicates a whole section to exploring the practical application of tantric principles in everyday life.
All right, now we're talking. Give me some examples. How can I bring a little Tantra into my daily grind?
One of the key takeaways is the concept of mindfulness, which Tantra emphasized centuries before it became a buzzword in the West. It's about paying attention to the present moment, to your body, your emotions, your thoughts, without judgment.
Okay, so more awareness, less autopilot. I can get behind that.
Exactly. And another area where Tantra offers practical guidance is in relationships. It views relationships as a path to spiritual growth,
Mhm.
emphasizing communication, empathy, and seeing the divine in your partner.
I can see how that ties back into the concept of Shakti, recognizing the feminine principle as a reflection of the divine.
Precisely. It's about cultivating reverence and an appreciation for both the masculine and feminine energies within yourself and in your relationships. And this can lead to deeper intimacy and understanding.
That's beautiful. So we've got mindfulness, relationships. What else? The book mentioned something called sadhana as a key element of Tantra. What exactly is sadhana?
Think of sadhana as your personal spiritual practice, your toolbox filled with different techniques to help you connect with the divine.
So is it like yoga, meditation, chanting? What kind of tools are we talking about here? So it's like a personalized spiritual toolkit, huh? Sign me up.
Yeah.
But seriously, what kind of tools are we talking about? What does sadhana look like in practice?
Well, it can be anything from, meditation and yoga to chanting mantras, visualizing mantras, or even, engaging in specific rituals. The key is finding practices that resonate with you and incorporating them into your daily life in a way that feels authentic and sustainable.
So it's not about forcing yourself into some rigid routine, but finding what works for you and adapting it to your own life.
Exactly. Tantra is a living tradition, not a set of dogma carved in stone. It's about finding what sparks your soul and helps you connect to that deeper reality.
I like that. It's about personalizing your spiritual path. But the book also mentions something else that really struck me. The idea that Tantra isn't just about, seeking personal liberation, but about liberating all beings from suffering. That seems like a pretty tall order.
It is, and it speaks to the ethical dimension of Tantra. It's not just about individual enlightenment, but about extending that compassion outward, working to alleviate suffering and create a more just and harmonious world.
So it's about recognizing our interconnectedness, realizing that we're all in this together.
Absolutely. It's about understanding that our actions have ripple effects, and that by cultivating compassion and wisdom within ourselves, we contribute to the well-being of everyone and everything around us.
That's a powerful message. It's not just about escaping reality, but about engaging with it.
Yeah.
Using our spiritual practice to make a positive difference in the world.
Exactly. And that's what makes Tantra so relevant today. It offers a path to navigate the challenges of modern life,
Yeah.
while staying connected to our deepest values and aspirations.
Well, I think this has been an incredible deep dive into the world of Tantra. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listener has too. We've busted some myths, explored some profound concepts, and even touched on the practical side of bringing these teachings into our lives.
Yeah, we've barely scratched the surface, but hopefully it's enough to spark some curiosity and inspire further exploration.
Exactly. And for anyone who wants to dive deeper, Principles of Tantra is an incredible resource. It's thought-provoking, challenging, and ultimately very, very inspiring.
Just remember, this is a path of self-discovery. Take your time, explore different practices, and find what resonates with you.
And most importantly, approach it with an open mind and a sincere heart.
The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step.
So take that step
Yeah.
and see where the path of Tantra leads you. Until next time, keep seeking, keep exploring, and keep